Chuyue, a notorious foolish and ugly woman in the Shenwu Empire, is associated with others, Ldquo, Gou Jue Amp, Rdquo, give birth to wild children. On the day of his fiancée's wedding, he jumped off the city wall wearing a wedding robe and died for love. With her beautiful eyes open for the first time, the master of the ancient martial arts sect from the 21st century will stir up a bloody storm, shedding all previous shame. Waste. Shake the empire with bare hands, step on the world with one foot. Stupid. Plan and strategize, and win a decisive victory thousands of miles away. Wild child. The son of Emperor Zun, with the bloodline of the emperor, who dares to be reckless when looking at the 8 wildernesses amp, Ldquo, mother, there's a handsome big brother outside who says he's my dad amp, Rdquo Amp, Ldquo, ask him to queue up at the back with the money amp, Rdquo. One day, Emperor Zun gave a sinister smile and said, I heard you've been telling people everywhere that I'm dead. Chapter 1. The Day of Wedding. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Bang. Chuyue fell with a splitting headache, lying in a pool of blood on the ground. While carrying out her mission, she was pushed out from the 30th floor building by her companions, afraid of falling to pieces. Unexpectedly not dead. Sounds ring in the ear. Even if the fools of the Yi family seek death, they don't have to jump down from the city gate, do they? It must have been intentional. The crown prince got married today, but she actually broke the engagement. At least she is also a legitimate young lady of the Yi family. How could she do such a thing? Her death is a small matter, but it would be unlucky to implicate the Yi family. Chuyue frowned and looked around, suddenly stunned. The crowd gathered, dressed in antique costumes, pointing at her, either angry or mocking. A bright red wedding procession stopped in front of the city gate. A handsome man riding a red steed and dressed in a robe, with a gloomy face, glared angrily at Chuyue. Like facing the enemy who killed his father, his gaze was as sharp and pressing as a knife. In the wedding sedan in the rear, a pleasant voice came from. Your Highness, why did you stop? Xian face softened a bit and he whispered, It's nothing, there's a dead dog blocking the city gate. Ah. The woman whispered softly, That's really unlucky. Your Highness, hurry up and drive it away. Chuyue gave a slight twitch at the corner of her mouth. Is this dead dog among the male population talking about her? She is a prominent martial arts sect leader who has crossed the 21st century and become a dog blocking the way. At this moment, Chuyue had a splitting headache, and a memory that did not belong to her flooded into her mind. Chuyue, the third miss of the Yi family, was originally a genius. She had been engaged to Prince Shenwu since childhood and had an affair with someone 5 years ago, giving birth to a child whose father was unknown. Afterwards, he suddenly became crazy and foolish, often going to the crown prince's mansion to find his beloved, and every time he received a beating. Today is the day of the crown prince's wedding, and I am so heartbroken that I jumped out of the city gate with the intention of dying. However, by chance, I shattered Xian wedding procession. Leaving such a mess for her to take over is really a headache. Xian looked disdainfully at Chuyue, a tattered shoe that had already been ruined, and had the delusion of getting his finger on it. Immediately, the opponent signaled, and 2 imposing guards walked up to Chuyue, shining sharp swords with a cold gleam, pointing at her in the pool of blood. Chuyue stood up slowly with her hands on the ground, her white dress dyed red with blood. At first glance, it was shocking. The onlookers were stunned, unsure of what this fool was going to do, while also being amazed by her tenacious vitality. Is this not dead? Chuyue stood in front of the galloping horse, with a smile on her blood-stained face. Xian furrowed his brows and became angry with embarrassment. He didn't know what this fool was going to do again. Like a dog's skin ointment, he couldn't shake it off for 5 years. The wedding sedan once again heard a soft and ethereal voice. Your Highness, it's almost auspicious time. Hasn't that dead dog been dealt with yet? Xian Yuanshan drank coldly and said, drive her away. The swords in the hands of the guards approached Chuyue, revealing a fierce light in their eyes. As the guards were about to take action, Chuyue smiled brightly and spoke clearly, Zuanyuanshan, your engagement with me has not been terminated yet. Are you busy getting married so quickly? It turns out that the crown prince can ignore secular rules. There was silence all around, and everyone was gasping for air. If it weren't for Chuyue's reminder, they would have forgotten about the engagement. If you are merciless, I will rest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Li Yun wanted to listen to the mournful music outside and tightened the thin cotton quilt on her tight-fitting body. A few days ago, the new cotton quilt sent from the New Year's mansion was taken away by Abbess Jingyan, who was guarding her. She could only barely sew this thin quilt using old cotton that had been used for several years. She had already draped all her clothes on the quilt, but unfortunately couldn't resist the chill in the air. She curled up under the blanket, trembling incessantly. The emperor passed away, as Xiao Yuqing told her when she secretly brought food to her. Since the death of Zhao Zhen, who was kind-hearted and kind, it has only been 3 years. Has another emperor died? Rubbing her hands and feet under the blanket, why is it getting colder tonight? She seems to feel the coldness piercing her bones. Perhaps she couldn't make it through anymore. In fact, she had already lived long enough to live to this age. She should have died as early as the day she was locked up here, but she never had the courage to commit suicide. Surprisingly, she lived for so many years again, constantly witnessing the happiness of the person who had been tampered with in life by her. I don't know if she was frozen, but she felt a faint pain in the area of her chest. It turned out that she still felt heartbroken, thinking that it was already empty. Thinking of that person, it seemed to remind her of another figure buried deep in her heart, and the cheerful laughter. Of course, he would never smile so gently and happily in front of her. He would always give her a gloomy expression, and the marriage she had worked so hard to win was just an insult to him. How could he have a smile on her? With a sigh, the mournful music that had been ringing outside seemed to pause for a while. The emperor passed away, and the whole country felt the same sorrow. Even though this place was far from the capital, officials and families still had to mourn to show their grief for the emperor's passing. Therefore, this temple also held this ritual. I couldn't help but recall many years ago, when she had experienced the death of an emperor for the first time in her life. At that time, she was just an ignorant little girl who had just been recognized by the Qin family. Under the indulgence of her father and grandmother, she became even more vain and unruly. Before the news of the emperor's death came, because he couldn't see the colorful brocade pleated skirt made by his stepmother for his second sister, but only prepared an ordinary brocade skirt for himself, he unexpectedly wrestled with his 6-year-old second sister and fell into the lake, thus becoming enemies with his stepmother. Later, when the new emperor ascended the throne, her father was busy managing the affairs of returning to the capital. However, her stepmother, citing her busy schedule, shirked the responsibility of nurturing her. As a result, after returning to the capital, she was ridiculed for not being polite and lacking in manners. If it weren't for the strict guidance and upbringing of her grandmother who invited her later, she would have made up her mind to please her second sister and apologize to her stepmother, which eased the relationship. She would not have been the head of the capital's noble daughter who was later praised by everyone. Unfortunately, a few years later, the arrival of that person shattered all this hypocritical glory and made her realize that she was just a fake occupying the magpie's nest. Unfortunately, she tried her best to stop the truth from being revealed in her heart, but that person, like a heavenly helper, escaped her repeated calculations. In the end, she became a wicked and vicious woman, while that person climbed to the top of the noble women in the capital, becoming a true golden branch in jade leaf. The most important thing is that her husband, who made her heart beat, worked hard to marry successfully, only saw that person in his eyes and heart. Even though that person had no feelings for him, he still followed behind that person. So much so that after she angrily framed that person, he discovered that she had demoted her wife to a concubine and sent her to the family temple. You poisonous woman, don't say compared to her, you're not even worthy of lifting her shoes. Thinking back on the last words I heard when I was sent away, the area on my chest felt a faint pain. If there were an afterlife, I would only want to be a true peasant girl, and never want this hypocritical glory in wealth again. Her eyes gradually blurred, without any warmth under the blanket, feeling her gradually cold limbs and heart. This was her last thought after losing consciousness. Chapter 3. Mother, do you not want Xiao Bao anymore? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. In February of the first year of Qianqing, Qingji held a medicine bowl and walked lightly through the hanging flower gate, entering the courtyard. As soon as she walked onto the Shusho corridor, she saw the little girl Ying'er, who was sweeping and sprinkling in the courtyard, running towards the gate. Ying'er, what are you doing when you run up? Have you forgotten all the rules? Qingji held the medicine bowl steadily and scolded lightly. Ying'er's face turned slightly red and she gasped for breath, saying, Sister Qingji, the eldest lady has woken up. Sister Qinghe has already gone to the children's courtyard to report and instructed the maidservant to listen to the eldest lady's instructions. The young lady is not thirsty now, and the maidservant is about to bring a fragrant soup to the eldest lady. Qingji exclaimed joyfully, Is that right? That's great. The eldest lady has been sleeping for several days, but she has finally woken up. Although she was very happy, Qingji still held the medicine bowl steadily, indicating that she was steady. However, her footsteps towards the eldest lady's chamber also became faster and faster. Entering the room, he carefully placed the tray on the table in the outer hall, and then walked gently towards the inside. At first glance, he saw a 3-step stepping bed. This bed was made by the husband after he retrieved the eldest lady. In order to compensate, he personally instructed the young man to make it for the eldest lady. It took the craftsman a full 3 months to make it, which was the first part of the eldest lady's dowry since then. At this moment, the doors to the bed were all open, and the bed curtains were raised high and hung on both sides. The old lady was lying on the bed with her eyes closed. The pale face had no trace of blood, and the originally cherry-red mouth was now dry and peeling. With a light sigh, Qingji cautiously walked into the bed and called out, Madam, Madam, are you awake? The little person on the bed heard her voice, opened their eyes, looked at her for a while, and then said in a hoarse voice, It's Qingji, reads. I'm awake. Seeing that the eldest lady had really woken up, Qingji happily said, The eldest lady has indeed woken up. These past few days have caused great concern for the children. You and the youngest lady fell into the water together. You said this cold day is really dangerous. Fortunately, you were rescued in time. Listening to Qingji's joyful chatter, the little person seemed to be still in a daze and didn't react much. However, Qingji didn't expect the little person to respond to her either. After finishing the chatter, she said, Since you're awake, madam, let's drink the medicine first. The kitchen has just cooked it, and it's time to drink it while it's hot. After speaking, she walked outside, but didn't see the little person behind her looking at her thoughtfully, with a mature expression that didn't look like a pheasant at all. Li Yun didn't know why he woke up from sleep. When he opened his eyes, he saw Qinghe, the maid who had been serving him for an hour. Qinghe had disappeared from her memory for too long, and she almost couldn't remember her appearance. If it weren't for her frequent reminders of childhood recently, she might not have recognized her. Fortunately, Qinghe saw that she woke up too happy and didn't see anything wrong with her. He happily said he wanted to go and report to the young man. At that time, she was looking at her little hands in a daze and surprise, so she didn't see her figure going out. Later, a little girl who she couldn't name came in and accompanied her attentively. Because she was too shocked, she dared not show her true colors and found an excuse to send the little girl out, leaving herself alone in the room to figure out what was going on. Then she looked at the decorations in the room and remembered the scene that seemed to have happened a long time ago. It was the third year she had been recognized back in the Qin family. Due to a dispute with her second sister, they both fell into the lotus pond. When she woke up, it was the same scene as before. This time falling into the water was also the beginning of her later tragic life. At this time, she had just been recognized back to the Qin family, and Qin Yun, who was favored by her grandmother and father, thought about it. Her biological parents were also living well at this time, and all the tragedies had not yet happened. But what exactly is going on? She clearly remembered that she was already in her 50s by this time, and was still locked up in the Qi family's temple waiting to die. How could she suddenly become the same person she was when she was a child? Is it true that all the experiences she had experienced were just a dream, or is it just a dream now? After pinching her thigh fiercely, the painful sensation indicated that she was not dreaming at this moment. So is that tragic life in her memory the dream? She thought with almost devout longing. Can such a clear dream be false, and how could she dream about so many things in the capital, who had never seen it before? And how could the uncle's family, who had never seen it before, come to life in their dreams? But if it weren't a dream, what would be the scene of her childhood when she woke up again now? In his mind, his thoughts were in chaos. Li Yun wanted to raise his hand and knock on his forehead, hoping to calm the chaotic thoughts, but was immediately stopped by Qingji. Originally, at this moment, Qingji happened to come in carrying a medicine bowl. Seeing her tapping her head with her hand, she quickly put down the medicine bowl and stepped forward to stop her. Qingji held Li Yun's small hand and said, "Madam, you dare not start like this. It could hurt you. You finally woke up, can't you hurt yourself anymore?" Li Yun thought he had no choice but to withdraw his hand and say, "I understand. I just had a headache earlier, and I won't do it again. By the way, where is Qinghe? Where has she gone?" Qingji stuffed her hand back into the quilt and tightened the blanket before saying, "Qinghe has gone to report the news of your awakening to the young man. You and the young lady have been very anxious about the young man these days, and they have lost a lot of weight in just 3 days. Fortunately, you have awakened and read. This young man can also let go of half of his heart. Is stepmother very worried about her?" Yes, at this moment in her dream, she started arguing with her second sister because she was jealous of her colorful brocade pleated skirt. They both fell into the water together after several fights by the lotus pond. However, there were not many people around them at that time, so their stepmother didn't know why they fell into the water. Moreover, after falling into the water, she, who knew how to swim, kept pulling her second sister who didn't know how to drown, so in everyone's eyes, it was as if she had saved her second sister. In her dream, when she woke up, her second sister woke up a few days later because her body was weaker than hers. Therefore, in the first few days she woke up, her stepmother really treated her like her second sister's lifesaver and personally took care of her for a day. Looking back now, at that time, she was afraid to reveal the truth, but she had always enjoyed the attentive service of her stepmother. Therefore, when her second sister woke up and revealed the truth, her stepmother had always regarded her as revenge. Yes, since she doesn't know if this dream is true or not, she can figure it out by trying it out. I remember that my second sister woke up around midnight 3 days later in the dream. This time, seeing if she still woke up at that time can verify whether that dream is true. Also, she remembered what she had thought of before the last time she fell asleep in her dream. She remembered that a big event had happened a few days after waking up from this slumber. No, it should have already happened. The emperor of this country passed away on the 19th day of this month. If she remembers correctly, the day she woke up was 19, and in 3 more days, it would be the day her second sister woke up in the morning. News arrived at the mansion, and then the father who was originally patrolling the spring plowing outside would return to the mansion. Afterwards, the father was busy managing the matter of returning to Beijing to report on his work, but he also ignored her relationship with her stepmother and entrusted all the affairs in the mansion to her. Meanwhile, the grandmother, who was getting older, also entrusted herself to her stepmother's upbringing. However, her stepmother was hating her at the moment, so how could she truly raise her? At that time, she was young and felt more comfortable being left unattended. Eventually, she became more and more stubborn and vain, and she always tried to curry favor and behave well in front of her grandmother. So much so that before returning to Beijing, her grandmother did not realize that she had lost her manners. It was not until she went to the capital and suffered a lot that she realized she had lost her manners. She also overlooked her biological parents who had raised her for 6 years. When she remembered it before returning to Beijing, she realized that it had been over a year since she had walked around the mansion. Isn't it precisely because her stepmother no longer worries about her after waking up this time? Before this, my stepmother, thinking of the kindness of raising her to the age of 6 over there, would treat her as a serious relative. However, when she woke up, she had no idea of the family there, and even when her elder brother came to visit her, she sent him directly without letting him enter the mansion. Afterwards, she never heard of anyone coming over there again, and she didn't know if it was because her stepmother didn't care about her, so she gave up the idea of repaying her kindness and no longer took that place seriously. Perhaps she was born to be a heartless and unjust person. Even before entering Beijing a year later, knowing that the area and the mansion had not moved for a year was just a matter of disdain. Thinking about when she fell into poverty later on, the only living elder brother in the family, who had traveled thousands of miles to Beijing, wanted to take her away in order to reach the Qi mansion. Thinking of my older brother's white hair at that time, he was only 30 years old. His weathered face showed how difficult his life was, and how could she really increase his burden by following him? "Oh, madam, why did you fall off the golden beans? Are you afraid of the bitter medicine?" "Don't be afraid, good medicine tastes bitter. After drinking the medicine, madam, you can recover from your illness." Qingji's ears were filled with words of concern. She regained consciousness from her memories and realized that tears had already flowed down her face. Looking up, I saw Qingji sitting on the embroidered mound with medicine, looking at her with concern. She held up a small soup spoon and said, "Come on, madam, be good. Let's drink the medicine. After drinking the medicine, the maid will give you a preserved fruit to eat." Chapter 4. Immortality. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Qingji's eyes were filled with concern for her. Li Yun couldn't help but nod and let her feed the bowl of medicine into her mouth one by one. It wasn't until she finished drinking the medicine and a sweet candied fruit was stuffed into her mouth that she remembered how she could finish the medicine in one go, instead of being so bitter one by one for so long. It seems that all these magical circumstances have led to the degeneration of one's mind back to childhood. "All right, madam, after taking the medicine, you can sleep soundly for a while longer. The maid will go and fetch some food for you. Unfortunately, you haven't had enough water or rice for several days." Qingji helped her lie down and tucked her in before leaving the door with peace of mind. After watching her go out, Li Yun thought to himself before turning his gaze back on her. Qingji and Qinghe were the maids assigned to her by her stepmother when she was first recognized as part of the Chen family, responsible for taking care of her food and clothing. When she first arrived at this house, she suddenly became wealthy. In fact, she had a period of fear and trembling. At that time, her stepmother seemed to see her inner timidity and gave her the 2 maidservants she was used to around her. During that period of time, Qingji and Qinghe had been carefully serving her, slowly correcting many bad habits she had developed due to poverty, and gradually making her accustomed to the life of a wealthy family. However, it was precisely because the 2 of them witnessed this experience that she regarded as a stain, that she gradually distanced herself from them in the later days. This is also one of the first things she did wrong. According to current court regulations, people are not allowed to buy or sell people, and most of the servants and maids used by wealthy families are hired. But truly wealthy aristocratic families actually have some servants, who have been living by attachment to their master's family since the previous dynasty. Generation after generation, they cultivate servants for their families, and these servants have been loyal to their master's family since childhood, living and dying for it. Qingji and Qinghe are both servants of the Qin family, and their stepmother only transferred them to her because she had just returned to the Qin family. The original intention was to help her adapt to the rules of the Qin family as soon as possible, and perhaps even to make them her future arms reeds. Unfortunately, in her dream, she did not understand her stepmother's kindness. Instead, because the two always reported her behavior to her stepmother, she became even less fond of getting close to them. Until later, when her stepmother saw that she did not use the two of them again and instead became close to the hired maids, she found an excuse to transfer them and send them to her second sister's room. A long time later, she also heard about the 2,000 gold coins from Qin Shangshu's family. After getting married, she brought two very capable accompanying rooms and helped her manage the family's property in an orderly manner, making her husband's family highly respected. At that time, she was already in a difficult situation, and occasionally hearing these words chatting was just like throwing another handful of salt at her bruised heart. At this time, she had only been with the Qin family for 2 years, and her unruly and capricious nature had not yet been cultivated. She did not have the same hatred towards her stepmother as she did later, and it was also the closest time for the two of them. Therefore, seeing Qingji's close and affectionate expression towards her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy. At this point, Qingji and Qinghe should have understood their stepmother's suggestion to them, believing that they would be bound to her for life, so their loyalty and love for her were unreserved, completely genuinely focused on her. Unfortunately, Li Yun's eyes dimmed as she thought. If all the things in her dreams were true, she would probably disappoint them again in this life. She remembered that all the tragedies in her dream were caused by her impersonation of Qin Yunshang's identity. If that was really her future situation, then she would have to change everything from the beginning and let everything return to its original place. Qinghe walked into the hanging flower gate with a slightly gloomy expression. She happily went to the young man to report the news of the old lady's awakening, but was uneasy by the young man's reaction. The young man first let her drive for a long time, but when he saw her later, he didn't have a good expression. Since the eldest lady has woken up, you should go back and take good care of her, and let her take care of her body. I have been busy with things these days, so I won't provoke any resentment for the time being. This is the original words spoken by the young woman, her face not looking good as she spoke, as if she was trying to hold back her anger. Qinghe remembered the attentive care that the young man had given to the eldest lady a few days ago, and his undisguised concern was that he personally went to the humble brocade courtyard yesterday to take care of the eldest lady for over half an hour. But today, the eldest lady finally woke up. Why did the young person behave differently, with a hidden resentment towards her in her words? She has always had a heavy mind and is puzzled by the changes in the attitude of the child before and after this incident, with a faint sense of ominei rising in her heart. Pushing open the door with a restless mind, she saw Yinger, who had been instructed by her to take care of the old lady, sitting on the embroidered pier, sewing and guarding the small door leading to the inside. "Did Auntie take the medicine? Are you awake now? Where's Qingji?" she asked softly. Yinger stood up and blessed before replying, "If you're my sister, the eldest lady has already taken medicine and a meal, and is currently asleep. Qingji has gone to the kitchen." Qinghe nodded and walked inside, saying, "You guard the door, I'll go in and take a look." "Yes." Yinger retreated to the door and drew the curtain, letting her in. As soon as she entered, she saw that the bed tent at the innermost corner of the bed had been put down, and she vaguely saw the little figure lying on the bed, lying neatly flat on the bed. From a distance, it was impossible to see whether the little person was awake or asleep. She walked lightly towards the bed without making any sound, afraid of waking up the sleeping lady. Arriving at the bedside, I lifted the curtain and looked into it. Although the little lady's face was still pale, her breathing had stabilized and she was sleeping with her eyes closed. So, I carefully lowered the curtain and planned to guard outside. Unexpectedly, she had only just pulled up the curtain when she heard the big lady on the bed say, "Is it Qinghe?" Her hand paused and she quickly lifted the curtain to look at the eldest lady, who was staring at her with a pair of dark watery eyes. "Madam, are you awake?" Did the maid disturb you? She asked softly. Li Yun wanted to shake his head and say, no, I'm not asleep. I've been awake all this time. Qinghe saw that the eldest lady didn't seem to be drowsy, so she lifted the tent and hung it high on both sides, saying, since the lady can't sleep, will the maid accompany you to talk? Since the eldest lady has woken up, let's first ask what happened that day. The change in the young woman's attitude towards her today has made her a bit uneasy. These days, she has been worried in her heart. She has always known that the mother does not like the child and the little girl born to the child. However, because she and Qingji have always helped to conceal their feelings, and some women dare not reveal their thoughts on their own. Therefore, apart from her and Qingji, no one knows when they leave this courtyard. But this time, the eldest lady and the youngest lady fell into the water at the same time, which shocked her greatly. However, the women who rescued the two on that day all said that it was thanks to the eldest lady pulling the youngest lady, otherwise the youngest lady would not be good. That's why she let go of her own worries. But now, looking at the attitude of the child today, she suddenly had a bad thought, afraid that things might really be what she had thought before. Watching the lady fall asleep for a few days and then lose weight, leaving only skin and bones, Xiao Lian, Qinghe said, Madam, you have woken up. This time, you have scared the maids. You said it's such a cold day, why did you accidentally fall into the lotus pond? Li Yun gave her a determined glance before saying, I accidentally pushed her down while arguing with second sister. At that time, second sister was pulling my clothes, so I was also pulled down. Do you know how second sister is now? Qingji's question made Li Yun's mind turn several times in an instant. In his dream, Qingji seemed to have asked her the same question before, but at that time, she did not reveal the truth to avoid responsibility. After waking up, second sister revealed the truth. She accused her stepmother and second sister of wronging her motherless child in front of her father. If it weren't for a woman who guarded the flower garden coming out to prove it later, and her own feelings of guilt being forced to reveal the truth by her stepmother, she was afraid it would still cause conflicts between her stepmother and father. In this way, the original dispute between her and her second sister was just an ordinary sisters, which turned into the beginning of the hatred between her and the children. This time, no matter whether the dream was true or not, she did not intend to escape responsibility as usual, and she had to do what she wanted. It was her own mistake, so she must bear it on her own. Even if she was scolded and disgusted by her father, she didn't want to follow the same old path as in her dream again. Qinghe's expression changed as she heard the old lady finish speaking. She quickly asked, Old lady, what you said is true. Did you really push the young lady down? Li Yun wanted to nod and say again, It's true, Qinghe. I accidentally pushed second sister down. Do you know how second sister is now? Is it a big problem? Qinghe saw that she had truly heard her right, and immediately took a step back in shock. She stumbled and sat on the embroidered pier by the bed. It turned out that she had guessed the truth and couldn't help but murmur, How could that be? What should I do? Madam, why are you so confused? That's your own sister. If it were to be spread, what would your reputation and your reputation do? In today's society, women have always had a great reputation. If someone finds out that the eldest lady once harmed her own younger sister, even if she is not careful, she may still carry the reputation of sibling violence. How can the lady marry in the future? Li Yun didn't expect that Qinghe had already thought about her future marriage. He just comforted and said, Qinghe, don't panic yet. I know I made a mistake this time, and I will apologize to my mother and sister. As for reputation, I don't care. Moreover, even if she didn't admit it at first in her dream, but was later discovered by her stepmother, there was no news of it spreading to the outside. She didn't let her stepmother down, and later in her dream, she was very grateful for her stepmother's kindness. Qinghe just looked at her with sadness, thinking that the eldest lady was still young and unaware of the importance placed on women's reputation in this world. If outsiders knew about this matter, no matter how the eldest lady tried to remedy it afterwards, the stain on her reputation could not be washed away. No matter how many years later, she would always bear the charge of sibling violence. Chapter 5. North Tower of Yi Mansion. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Compared to Qinghe's worries, Li Yunxiang doesn't care so much about her future reputation. What she cares most about now is naturally whether that dream foreshadows her future. If that dream is real, then what should she do to bring everything back to its original state? Seeing Qinghe still sitting on the embroidered pier, lost in thought, Li Yun couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Qinghe, haven't you told me how my second sister is doing yet?" Qinghe regained her composure and looked at the calm gaze of the eldest lady. She could only temporarily let go of her worries. After all, the eldest lady had already done it. No matter how anxious she was now, she could not salvage it. Now she could only think of ways to remedy it. The young lady is still sleeping. She has always been weak and has suffered from such a crime. I don't know when she will wake up. Madam, don't blame the maid for offending you. You have done too much this time. The young lady is your own sister. Even if she is not close to you on a daily basis, you shouldn't have done that. Li Yun's eyes darkened, but he still said, I know I made a mistake, so I want to go see my second sister. Qinghe looked at her with some surprise, but then said, it's good if Madam knows you're wrong, but you just woke up and your body is still weak. Why don't you go see Madam again in a few days? I'm afraid it won't be too late in a few days, Li Yun thought to himself. The reason why she wants to go see her second sister is that she did fall asleep because she was pushed into the water, so she must go to visit her condition after waking up. The second is that regardless of whether the things in the dream come true or not, she must rush to apologize to her stepmother as soon as possible to prevent the situation from developing like a dream and eventually becoming uncontrollable. The second younger sister lives with her stepmother at the Qingji Academy, so she can handle two things together. Ignoring Qinghe's dissuasion, Li Yun decided to hold on to his weak body and get up, wearing a coat as a reward. With the help of Qinghe and Yinger, he went to meet her stepmother Su outside the Qingji Academy. When Su heard her stepdaughter come to pay respects, her first reaction was disbelief. What kind of personality is the stepdaughter? She has gained some understanding after 2 years, but she is a stubborn master. It's unbelievable for someone like this to wake up from a coma and think of coming to greet her. Since ancient times, the stepmother has been the most difficult to do. When the stepdaughter first recognized her, she knew that her husband and mother-in-law were not at ease with taking care of the child. Therefore, except for giving her 2 maidservants whom she needed the most to her stepdaughter, she did not interfere much in everything around her unless necessary. Anyway, that girl is her cousin's own daughter, and in total, she is also her niece. Therefore, she is also very concerned about this stepdaughter, and her daily life supply is a part of the household. But she never expected that her kindness would raise a white-eyed wolf. She finally woke up, but her body is still weak. Please let her go back and rest. We'll talk about it when we're okay. Su Shi held a teacup in her hand and said to the maid who came in to report. I saw the little maid guarding the door, who was blessed and said, yes, before retreating. Wait. Su called out again before the maid could retreat to the door. After a while, she said again, let her in. Li Yun wanted to be carried into the room by Qinghe and Yinger, and saw his stepmother Su sitting in the main seat of the hall, watching her enter. Slowly walking 3 steps ahead of Su, Li Yun finally let go of the hands of the 2 maids and respectfully blessed Su, saying, my son, please give my mother my regards. Su sat and received her full salute before taking her hand and saying, you child, you just woke up. Why did you get up? You're not afraid of getting worse. This made Li Yun want to sit next to her. Li Yun wanted to take the opportunity to sit down before saying to Su, thank you, mother. After my son woke up, I heard that my mother had been working hard for him for many days while he was asleep, which made him thin and uneasy. I came to express my gratitude to my mother. Su smiled and said, You child, you are sick. It is only right for your mother to work for you. Why say thank you? Li Yun wanted to shake his head and say, Mother has worked hard for her son. If he doesn't come to thank him, how can he feel at ease? Besides, I have heard that my second sister is still asleep, and it's even more difficult for me to remain calm. I feel both ashamed and regretful. I kindly ask my mother to allow me to go and see my second sister. Upon hearing her say so, Su's heart moved and she couldn't help but glance at Qinghe. Today, she suddenly heard from a rough old woman that there may be some hidden information about her daughter and stepdaughter falling into the water. It seems that they fell into the water while arguing with their stepdaughter, and it is possible that the stepdaughter caused harm to her own daughter. When Qinghe reported to his stepdaughter that she had just received the news, she angrily refused to meet Qinghe. Perhaps Qinghe had said something to his stepdaughter when she returned, which led her to come to see him with her sick body. Turning to look at Li Yun, Su couldn't help but ask, You child, you saved your sister in the water that day. It should be your mother who thanked you. Why should you regret it? Li Yun glanced at the maid standing on both sides of the hall and said, Please forgive me, mother. My son has something important to report to his mother. Can you please ask my mother to hold back? Su Shi gave her a determined glance and couldn't help but sigh at the pleading in her eyes. He waved his hand and asked the maids in the hall to leave, along with Qinghe and Yinger. After the maids all retreated, Li Yun wanted to turn around and knelt in front of Su Shi. Su was startled and quickly stood up to try to pull her up. She exclaimed in surprise, My son, why are you kneeling down suddenly? Li Yun wanted to raise his hand to stop her and said, My son needs to report something to his mother. Please don't panic, my mother. My son can speak with peace of mind when he kneels down. Please sit down and listen carefully. Seeing her persistent expression, Su could only sit down and listen to her talk. Li Yun thought for a moment before continuing, What I want to report to my mother is that this time my second sister fell into the water was really my own fault. That day, when I heard that my mother had made a new colorful brocade pleated skirt for my second sister, I felt jealous and had a dispute with her. Later, I even got into a fight with my sister and accidentally pushed her into the lotus pond. As she spoke, she lifted her head and shed tears filled with guilt, saying, Mother, the reason why second sister fell into the water and has not woken up until now is all because of her son. The son dare not ask his mother for forgiveness, only asking his mother to let him go see his sister, and then let his mother punish him without complaint. What the old woman said was actually true. Su couldn't help but stand up in anger and say, It's really you. Why are you so ruthless? Your sister is only a few years old, and for the sake of a dress, you should have killed your own sister so badly. Li Yun wanted to look into Su Shi's angry eyes and cried bitterly, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. It was my jealousy that caused harm to my sister. Now I don't ask for your forgiveness, I just ask you to let me go see my sister's reeds. Su said in a resentful tone, No need, my mother and daughter can't bear your concern. Please don't approach her again in the future. She suppressed her anger and turned her back, saying, I won't pursue this matter again today. You don't have to go see your sister anymore. In the future, you don't have to go see her. I won't let the water in your well cross the river with you. You can do it yourself. Mother. Please. Although Su said so, Li Yun thought he wanted to try again and beg Su to agree to go and see his second sister. Chapter 6. Chicken Roaring and Dog Thieves. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The third day was approaching quickly, and still being confined to bed by Qinghe and the others, Li Yun, who had been recuperating, thought that he couldn't lie down this morning. Everyone in the humble brocade courtyard didn't understand why the elderly lady, who had been recuperating peacefully, was particularly anxious today. Not only did she wake up early in the morning and wear a coat, but she didn't go out, just pacing back and forth in the yard as if waiting for something. Qinghe, what time is it now? It's about 3/4 of an hour, right? The eldest lady has asked this question 10 times, and Qinghe really doesn't understand why the eldest lady is so abnormal today. Is it already 3/4 past midnight? In the dream, someone was delivering a letter to the mansion around 2¼ hours today. She had already sent Ying'er to the front yard to inquire about the news, but she has not seen her return yet. Obviously, the thing she was thinking about should not have happened, so it was really just a dream and had nothing to do with her future, right? Li Yun no longer knew whether he should be happy that the tragedy had not come true, or sad that he would no longer be a prophet of the future, and whether there would be any other, worse changes. After about 1/4 of an hour, just as she was certain that something wouldn't happen and was about to return to her room, the little maid Ying'er ran into the courtyard, panting heavily, and ran to her face, saying, "Madam, there really is someone riding a fast horse into the mansion." By now, she has been invited into the Qingji yard. So that's true. Before losing consciousness, Li Yun seemed to hear the panicked cries of Qinghe and Qingji. When she opened her eyes again, she unexpectedly saw her stepmother's face at first glance. Stepmother Su was sitting on the embroidered pier next to her bed, looking at her. "Mother." Li Yun struggled to get up and salute Su Shi. "No need to be polite, just lie down. You know you're weak and still struggling like this." Su's tone of voice was no longer as strong as last time, slightly softer. "What's wrong with me, mother? Why did you come over? Please forgive me for being rude." Li Yun thought to himself, feeling confused, but he was really powerless and couldn't move his body, so he didn't insist on getting up. Qinghe, standing next to the Su family, said with red eyes, "Madam, you have finally woken up. Do you know that you have been sleeping for another day and night, which has made the maidservants anxious?" Su looked at her with some helplessness and said, "You too. They all said you should take good care of yourself, so don't think too recklessly." The little child was diagnosed by the doctor with excessive mental health and was stuck in the heart. Su also understood in her heart that her stepdaughter was feeling depressed over the dispute over falling into the water with her younger daughter. When she first found out about it, she was also extremely angry. However, the stepdaughter, who was the culprit, was only an 8-year-old child, and she couldn't blame her in any way. "Unexpectedly, my daughter woke up yesterday and said that although it was her stepdaughter who accidentally pushed her into the water that day, when she took a few sips of water and thought she was going to die, she was also tightly held by her stepdaughter, helping her float on the water's surface and not drowning." The daughter, with lingering palpitations, somehow woke up thinking about her stepdaughter and shouting for her sister. After she returned, she let go of her prejudices and imagined the scene of that day. If her stepdaughter had let go of her daughter and swam ashore on her own, or if her daughter had only been afraid, it would have been really dangerous. At this thought, her anger disappeared for some reason, and instead, she felt a little grateful for her stepdaughter. "So yesterday when I heard that my stepdaughter suddenly fainted, I asked a doctor to diagnose that it was because her stepdaughter was feeling depressed and didn't take good care of herself that she fainted. Therefore, I thought it was because she was still drowning for her daughter, which made me feel depressed." With a sigh, Su said, "Your sister woke up yesterday. She said that although you caused her to fall into the water, you saved her. She doesn't blame you. Since that's the case, you don't have to worry anymore. Relax and take good care of your illness." "Has my younger sister woken up yet?" Li Yun asked in surprise, then timidly glanced at Su Shi. "I want to go see my younger sister, please allow my mother." Since that dream is indeed true, she must never have any more grudges with Su Shi's mother and daughter this time. Even if she wants to go back to the Li family in the future, she doesn't want to hear such unfilial and disrespectful comments again because she is not actually her biological daughter. This time, Su did not stop her, but said, "If you haven't got well these days, don't go, and wait a day or two to get better. You are sisters, and you should get along well in the future. Don't get angry again." Li Yun didn't expect to faint once, and Su softened her attitude towards her. It was truly a pleasant surprise. It seems that this incident of falling into the water should really come to an end. Su didn't stay much. On that day, news came from the capital that the official family had already passed away on the 19th. She was also busy these days. All the illegal decorations in the mansion had to be replaced, and she had to make mourning clothes for her family. When the master returned in a few days, he said he had to do a ritual. Su left, and Li Yun wanted to send Xinghe and the others out, lying alone in bed in a daze. On that day and night, she fell asleep, but her mind remained clear. In her sleep, she once again recalled everything that had happened in her dream. She found that all the memories were very clear, and everything that had happened for decades was clearly imprinted in her mind. Li Yun wanted to secretly swear again that this time, she would never go through that tragic life again. This time, she must make everything return to its original position. How can we bring her and Chen Yunshang back to their original identities? At this moment, apart from her prophet, no one should know about this matter. How can she make people believe that her identity with Chen Yunshang has been exchanged without involving her own parents? In the dream, Chen Yunshang was able to prove her identity because Ji left a silk embroidered with her secret background, which was sewn on the wrapping cloth she used at the time. But that was only for supporting evidence. At that time, she also refuted it on the grounds that the silk was not left by the Ji family, but by Chen Yunshang's falsification. It was only in the end that Chen Yunshang was confirmed to be the daughter of the Chen family when he shed blood and recognized his family in the lobby of Kaifeng Prefecture. Now, if she directly finds out the silk, can it prove that her identity has been exchanged with Chen Yunshang? But in this way, will it be considered like in a dream that her parents exchanged their identities? No, this time she must investigate how she and Chen Yunshang were exchanged on that day in order to expose the situation. But in just over a year, the Chen family will be returning to Beijing. Can she investigate everything thoroughly within this year? Thinking of this, she suddenly sat up and almost forgot one of the most important things. She remembers the day when her second sister woke up in her dream, the truth about the drowning incident was discovered, and her stepmother, Su Shi, had a falling out with her. On that day, her older brother came to the mansion to see her, but she didn't see him because she was in a bad mood and had him sent away directly. This time, she won't miss Big Brother again, will she? Xinghe, Xinghe, she quickly called out. Madam, where are the maids? Xinghe lifted the curtain and walked quickly into the room, asking, Madam, what's going on? Why are you sitting up? Lie down and cover yourself with a blanket. Don't freeze yourself in this cold day. Li Yun thought but grabbed her hand and didn't lie down according to her words. Instead, he asked her anxiously, Xinghe, my big brother yesterday. No, I mean, did the big brother from the Li family come to the mansion? Xinghe saw that she was asking this, and couldn't help but be surprised and say, Madam, how did you know? Yesterday, the old lady who guarded the second gate had said that the Li family leader came to the mansion to seek an audience. However, yesterday the mansion was chaotic and you fell asleep again, so the maid asked him to go back first. Is that right? Li Yun thought to murmur, realizing that Big Brother really came. Xinghe didn't know what she was thinking, but seeing her expression of confusion, she said, Madam, do you think about the people over there? Yes, you grew up in that family and your relationship has definitely been strong for so many years. It's okay. If you think about it, the maid will send someone to take a look and let someone from there come into the mansion to see you. As he spoke, he helped her lie down. Li Yun thought about the Li family and lay down, with Xinghe covering her with a blanket. Speaking of which, since she was recognized and returned to the Chen family, although her stepmother was willing to treat her as a legitimate relative over there, it was not right to treat her as an unofficial household, and she never came to the mansion much. Yesterday was not festive, why did the elder brother come to seek an audience? It seems that she has never seen anyone over there since then. Many years later, I only heard about them from Chen Yunshang in the capital, but by then, not only had my parents passed away, but even my two younger brothers were gone, and only my older brother was still alive. Perhaps, Qinghe. Li Yun wanted to look up and say, tomorrow, no, what time is it now? Qinghe looked out the window and said with uncertainty, it's already too late. Li Yun wanted to nod and say, you just need someone to go to the Li family today and ask why the elder brother of the Li family came to the mansion yesterday, but what's going on at home? Qinghe looked at the sky outside and said, I'll send someone today, but it's almost dark soon. Can't we go tomorrow? Li Yun wanted to shake his head and said firmly, no, go now. Qinghe looked at her puzzled and saw that she still had a persistent expression on her face. She could only do as she said, but was stopped when she walked to the door. Wait. Li Yun thought for a moment before saying again, bring my box, open it and take out 10 taels of silver for the person to carry. If there is an urgent matter, it will be easy to deal with it. Madam, are you saying there will be anything difficult over there? Qinghe asked in surprise. Li Yun thought but shook his head and said, I don't know either, but yesterday was not a holiday. Li's elder brother should have had an urgent matter when he came to the mansion, but I haven't seen him either, and I don't know what exactly happened there. I brought the money with me to deal with it. Qinghe just left thoughtfully. She has always been kind-hearted, and if there is anything difficult over there, she also hopes to help. So she went to the outer courtyard to find a steady young man, gave him money, and instructed him to go to the Li family as soon as possible. Chapter 7. Do you want to die? You are listening at novelfull.audio. The young man sent by Qinghe only returned to the mansion the next day. When he returned to report to Qinghe, he said with lingering fear, thank you, sister, for letting me go. This trip was really thrilling. Qinghe was startled and quickly asked, what's going on? Is it really that the Li family is facing difficulties? The young man replied, no, when I went, the family was so anxious that they were about to get into the house. The young lady of the Li family was hit by a carriage on the street a few days ago, and it has been burning for several days. We invited several doctors, but they still couldn't get the fever down. When I went, I happened to encounter the head of the family who couldn't bear it and fell ill in bed. The house was in chaos, and the young one immediately went to Dr. Li's family, who had a good relationship with our family. After all, Dr. Li was invited to visit Mrs. Li and the head of the Li family, and he has been waiting there ever since. This morning, he waited until Mrs. Li's fever subsided before returning to the mansion. This kid's words were like a notebook, fluctuating like a rock, and Qinghe's emotions fluctuated with it. After listening to him, he asked clearly that the young lady of the Li family and the head of the Li family were indeed in good condition for the time being, and finally returned to the inner courtyard with peace of mind. Li Yun wanted to know the details from Qinghe's mouth, only then did she understand how much her stubbornness in the dream had caused her to make mistakes. For a moment, she only felt immense pain in her heart. Without her help, how did the Li family survive at that time? Years later, the only person left in the Li family was the eldest brother. Is it because of this disaster? A tear fell on her hand, and Li Yun suddenly felt fortunate again. Regardless of the reason why she had this dream, she was extremely grateful to God for giving her a chance to start over again. This time, she would never let these relatives repeat the ending of the dream. Qinghe was surprised to see Li Yun feeling so sad. Strange, did the eldest lady care so much about those people in the Li family? But I haven't seen the eldest lady mention the Li family in the past 2 years. Even when I give gifts to that family on weekdays, I haven't seen the eldest lady add anything. Every time it's just a common gift from the public. Perhaps the surprise in Qinghe's heart was so great that it appeared on his face that Li Yun wanted to notice. She said as if to cover up, when I was young, the Li family treated me very well, but I haven't returned the kindness they have given me since I returned to the Qin family. Unfortunately, this time they are in trouble. It was when they needed me, but I was sick and almost couldn't help them. It really makes me feel guilty. Qinghe couldn't help comforting her with a look of shame on her face. Madam, don't worry. The young man outside said that the young lady of the Li family has already recovered her fever today, and the head of the Li family is just overworked and not a big deal. If you don't trust me, I will ask that young lady to go a few more times in the next few days to take good care of that family for you. Li Yun wanted to take a sniff and said, then I'll trouble you, Qinghe. I also need you to help me thank that young man. Later, you can come to my box and take out 20 taels of silver. Tell the young man not to be stingy with the silver and come back to pick up the flowers that need to be used there. If there's not enough, he'll come back to pick them up. Qinghe responded and went out to arrange. She had no resistance to Li Yun's desire to use her private money to treat the Li family. She was born into a big family and didn't care much about these trivial matters. However, she placed more emphasis on the cultivation of the eldest lady's character. Even if the eldest lady used up all her private property to repay the Li family's kindness, she would only be happy that the eldest lady's character was noble and pure, valuing human relationships over money. Although Qinghe had already made arrangements, Li Yun couldn't let go after all. After another day, he couldn't help but go to his stepmother Su's diligent weaving house, begging Su to allow her to visit the Li family. In today's society, there are not as many restrictions on women from wealthy families going out as they did later. She only needs to obtain the consent of her stepmother and bring a few servants to go out. Of course, when going out, she naturally needs to wear a curtain hat and must ride back and forth in a carriage, trying not to appear in front of others. Su was somewhat surprised when she heard her request. She always felt that since her stepdaughter fell into the water this time, her actions had changed significantly. She seemed to be more stable than before and her attitude towards her was much more respectful than before. It seemed that this time she had really learned a lesson from her mistakes. However, she remembered that her stepdaughter was not close to the Li family before. How could she be so attentive this time, or was there something inside that she didn't know? The humble brocade courtyard sent a servant to visit the Li family and helped hire an imperial physician. She naturally knew about this and did not doubt its authenticity, but her stepdaughter suddenly changed her attitude towards the family, which still left her somewhat puzzled. Mother, the Li family used to treat their children with great kindness and righteousness in the past. They have encountered difficulties this time, and I can't rest assured that my child won't go and see it with my own eyes. I hope my mother can approve of my child's kindness this time and never forget her kindness in the future. Li Yun wanted to see Su's face hesitant, afraid that she would refuse, so he begged again. Seeing her pleading expression on her face, Su couldn't bear it anymore and said, "All right, if you really want to go, then go ahead. But you need to bring more people. The official family has passed away, and it is a time of transition between the old and new dynasties in the imperial court. Fuzhou is also a chaotic coastal area, and it may not be too peaceful outside. You should go and return quickly, do you know?" "Yes, thank you very much for your mother's success. My son will definitely go and return soon." Li Yun was overjoyed to see her promise to go to the Li family, so he quickly agreed. However, for wealthy families to travel, it is not just about leaving. You need to first order the accompanying personnel and bring all necessary supplies. Outside, you also need to have the stable set up the carriage and find a stable coachman. When everything is ready, it is already noon. In order to see his family earlier, Li Yun wanted to put on his coat and reward early. He added a hood outside and didn't delay in front of the dressing table for a long time. He brought some soft clothes and waited for the front to announce that the carriage was ready before hurriedly leaving. Listening to the sound of vendors selling on the street, Li Yun in the carriage couldn't help but nervously tug at the handkerchief in his hand. Are you about to see her parents? Although in reality she has only been with the Chen family for 2 years and her parents seem to still be around, in her dreams she has been living alone for so long. Even now, she trembles with excitement at the thought of meeting them. "Madam, don't worry too much. Dr. Li is a rare miracle doctor, and those 2 of the Li family's illnesses will definitely recover." Qingji looked at the nervous expression on the face of the eldest lady, feeling a bit puzzled. She thought she was just worried about the Li family, unaware that her eldest lady was thrilled to see her long-lost loved ones. This time when she came to the Li family, only Qingji came out to serve her closely. Qinghe was left in the yard to stay at home. Li Yun thought that this visit to the Li family was not only for the purpose of seeking medical treatment, but also for the rare opportunity she had to come out. She also wanted to take a look at the wrapping cloth that he and Chen Yunshang had in the past, to see if she could find the piece hidden with the silk. The opportunity for her to come out is rare, so she cannot miss any opportunity to find out the truth. However, Qinghe is too careful and she is not sure what to do under Qinghe's nose, so she only brought Qingji, who has always been careless. The carriage quickly arrived at the pear blossom alley where the Li family was located. There was an old pear tree on this street, which produced big and sweet pears. Whenever spring and summer alternate, the pear flowers bloom and fill the entire alley with fragrance, hence the name Pear Flower Lane. The Li family has already received news, so Li's father and Li Daolong are already waiting at the door. I've seen the Li family's father. I've seen the Li family's brother. Li Yun thought to get off the carriage and saw the two people who had once dared not even dream. She wanted to fly over and hug them, crying bitterly. However, her rationality still made her suppress her excitement, just bowing slightly and giving them an ordinary junior salute. Li's father tearfully wanted to help her up, but he didn't dare to reach out for fear of offending her. He could only keep saying, "Hey, hey, no need to be polite, no need to be polite, good girl, get up quickly." Li Daolong also looked at the girl in front of him with red eyes, who was wearing a curtain hat. This little sister he had carried from childhood to adulthood, and had been carefully nurturing to the best of his family's ability. From a young age, he understood that this younger sister was different. She was the daughter of their family's life-saving benefactor. Therefore, even if all the family members couldn't eat enough or wear warm clothes when they were young, they still wanted to make their younger sister live the best life. But they still let their little sister suffer too much. Watching her now wearing the best brocade clothes, riding a luxurious carriage outside, surrounded by servants, they couldn't help but sigh that they had been too unfair to their little sister in the past, and now this is the life she should live. Qingji saw that the eldest lady was only standing in front of the door with tears in her eyes, so she couldn't help but step forward and say, "Mr. Li, the eldest lady has just recovered from her illness. You can't stand for a long time. Let's go talk first." Upon hearing her say this, Li's father quickly said, yes, come in quickly. It's freezing in the sky." "Girl, no, it's the eldest lady. You should take good care of yourself in the mansion. Why did you condescend to come to my humble abode? It's really frustrating for me." Although he said so, it still led Li Yun to think of a group of people walking inside. Li Yun choked up as he walked and said, "I heard that the younger sister of the Li family and her mother are seriously ill. If I don't come over to take a look in person, I can't rest assured." Li's father almost burst into tears when he heard it, and turned around and said, "It's really difficult for you. It was a shame that you sent someone yesterday. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid your sister. You saved the old man's family." Li Yun wanted to quickly ask, "How is your sister doing now? Is there any improvement?" Li Daolong hurriedly said, "Thanks to madam, my sister's fever has subsided today. This morning, Dr. Li came again and prescribed medicine. Your young man caught the medicine and it is currently being decocted." Li Yun wanted to nod and continued asking, "Is my Li family's nanny better now? She has always been weak, but she needs to be treated well. Don't let the root of the illness fall. You don't have to worry about the money, just cure the disease first. I still have it here." Upon hearing her say this, Father Li quickly said, Enough. You have already given me 30 taels of silver, but I dare not go out again. This is all because the little old man's family is dragging you down. The Li family treats their children with great kindness, and now it's just a small amount of money. How can we repay your kindness in case of any inconvenience? Please don't be polite to your children, Li's father. If that's the case, wouldn't it be too outrageous? Li Yun thought to say. Chapter 8. Confession and 3 Trials. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The big lady is really a kind-hearted person, just like your mother. Father Li looked at the adopted daughter gratefully, and couldn't help nodding his head with red eyes, without saying no more. This adopted daughter was raised by the Qin family from a young age until she was 6 years old. Although she did not suffer from hunger or cold, she did not live a good life. But now that their family is in trouble, thanks to the help of this adopted daughter, she has not left. Thinking that his daughter had a high fever the day before yesterday and all the savings in the family had been used up, he had the audacity to ask his son to seek help from the Qin family. However, he did not expect to be sent out without even seeing the adoptive daughter. At that time, they were completely at a loss, but they didn't expect even worse. Yesterday, my wife fell ill in bed due to overwork. But he, as an old man, could only watch helplessly as this home reached the brink of collapse, with no tears to shed. But at this moment, the person sent by the adopted daughter seemed to come from the sky to their house, not only inviting the poor doctors who could not be hired to treat their daughter and wife, but also covering all the expenses. The adopted daughter truly deserves to be the daughter of a benefactor, equally kind-hearted and generous. Li's father, who was thinking this way, didn't know that when Li Yun wanted to hear him say this, his mouth couldn't help but twitch, but because he was wearing a curtain hat, no one saw him. The yard is very small, with only 5 small rooms, the main hall in the middle, and 2 wing rooms in the east. One is the bedroom of the Li family and Qin Yunshang. When Li Yun was young, he lived with Qin Yunshang in the same room, but after she left, Qin Yunshang slept alone here. There is only 1 wing room on the west side, and next to it is the kitchen. Outside the kitchen, a shed has been built to make a firewood room and a toilet. Entering the courtyard, Li Yun took off his curtain cap and headed towards the east wing, saying to the people following him, I will go to the Li family's mother's room, and you can wait in the courtyard. Qingji didn't understand why Li Yun wanted her not to follow in, but she didn't refute her eldest wife's intentions in front of outsiders. This is also one of the reasons why Li Yun wanted to bring her out. If it were Qinghe who came, she would probably follow her in on the grounds of unease. She would never let her eldest wife have the opportunity to face the man alone, even her adoptive father and brother. Li Yun wanted to go straight into Lady Li's room. Compared to Qin Yunshang, who had no blood relationship and had a hostile relationship with her in her dream, she only cared about the safety of her own mother, Lady Li. Li's father followed Li Yun and wanted to enter the house, while Li Dalong stayed outside to greet the people who followed Li Yun and make tea or something. Upon entering the door, I saw the thin figure lying in bed, with a pale face, thin cheeks, sunken eyes, and a person under 30 years old whose temples had already been stained with white frost. Mother. Tears didn't fall on her cheeks on her own. Li Yun thought for a few steps and rushed to the bedside, pulling up his own mother's hand and calling out in a mournful voice. However, she woke up Mrs. Li on the bed. Li Nyangzi opened her eyes and saw a little person crying at her, whom she thought she would never see again in her lifetime. Think about it, is it you? Or is it your mother dreaming again? Mrs. Li raised her tightly held hand and touched the small face of the person in front of her, the warm warmth. Isn't it just a dream? Mom, you're not dreaming, you're wanting to come back and see you. Li Yun wanted to tightly hold Li Nyangzi's cold hand, tears welling up. I have never hated my past self like this before. Why haven't I come back to see her since I went to the Qin family? My parents and brother have been pampering her since childhood, giving her the best. But when she returned to the Qin family, she only knew how to enjoy a life of wealth, taking the Li family's efforts for granted and never expecting anything in return. Even if she is truly the daughter of the Qin family, her actions are really chilling. No wonder when she was in trouble later, Qin Yunshang would say that she was just a white-eyed wolf. In the end, the betrayal and separation of the people were just a result of their own actions, and it was not worthy of sympathy. I'm sorry, you're back now. Mom misses you so much. Seeing her daughter who had been thinking about her day and night really come back, Mrs. Li couldn't help but sit up excitedly and hug Li Yun, wanting to cry bitterly. Li Yun wanted to be held tightly by his mother, and suddenly all the grievances and fears seemed to have an outlet, and he burst into tears. Seeing the mother and daughter hugging their heads and crying, Li's father, who was following behind, couldn't help but blush. Li Nyangzi is the person who loves Yunxiang the most in the Li family. Even though she has just given birth to a daughter since seeing Xiaoyun, for some reason, she just looks at Xiaoyun and wants to kiss her, involuntarily wanting to be good to her. After Yunxiang was recognized by the Qin family, Li Nyangzi couldn't sleep day and night for a while. In the middle of the night, she often held Yunxiang's childhood clothes and cried all night. This time, the mother and daughter finally saw each other again, making Mr. Li couldn't help but feel that these two women were not biological, but rather biological. But seeing them crying endlessly, I couldn't help but come forward and persuade them, all right, don't cry anymore. Yun wants to come back after all, it's a happy thing. Yes, my dear mother is currently sick. If I cry like this, I will hurt myself. Li Yun stopped crying and said, Mother, don't cry. You are still sick. If you hurt yourself, it would be my fault. Mrs. Li has actually cried quite a bit. She has always been a straightforward person. If it weren't for missing her daughter too much and not being able to see her, she wouldn't have cried for so long. At this moment, when I came back to my senses, I realized that this was no longer my daughter. I couldn't help but want to shed tears, but I managed to hold back. Think about it, why did you come back? Do the Qin family know that there is someone to accompany you when you come out? Mrs. Li asked. Mother, don't worry, I already reported to Chen when I came out. Mother has already arranged for someone to follow the reeds. Li Yun wanted to reply. That's good. Mrs. Li nodded and hesitated for a moment before continuing, I think you're already the daughter of the Qin family now. Don't call me, my mother, again in the future, it's not good to be heard. No, I just want to call you Nyang. There's no one here. What's wrong with calling me Nyang? Besides, since you've been raising me for 6 years, you've been calling me Nyang all the time. That's just right. Li Yun pouted, unable to call me Nyang openly or privately. Seeing her daughter's proud and coquettish expression, Mrs. Li couldn't help but feel warm in her heart and said, all right, you can just call if you like, but you can only call in private. If you go out, it won't do. It will make your current mother sad. By the way, you've been to the Qin family for so long, how well does your mother treat you? Li Yun nodded and said, don't worry, mother treats me very well. My daily service in the Qin mansion is only better than my sister's, not worse. Is it just a matter of example? Isn't that just a superficial appearance? Mrs. Li couldn't help but remain silent for a while before saying, I just got recognized. Maybe it's a bit unfamiliar. You should remember to go and greet your mother more, get along with her more, be filial to her more. People's hearts are all flesh, and with more interaction, emotions will be formed. Li Yun wanted to blink his eyes and turn back his tears. Sure enough, his mother was the one who cared most about him. He smiled and said, I know, I will be filial to my mother in the future. When she finds a way to restore Chen Yunshang's identity, let Chen Yunshang be filial to the Su family. It was only when she thought of Chen Yunshang that she realized the other person who came here with one goal in mind. He asked, Mom, I've been confused since being recognized by the Chen family. There's something I can't figure out and I want to ask you. After a moment of silence, Mrs. Li looked at her daughter's wide-open eyes and couldn't help but say with a soft heart, if you have anything unclear, just ask. Li Yun wanted to see the hint of hesitation that flashed on Mrs. Li's face, and his heart moved. Does the mother know that there is an insider information about the marriage? She hesitated a bit, but still asked, "Mother, can you tell me in detail how I got to the Li family's daughter back then?" Li Nyangzi gave her a determined glance, with a hint of resentment in her eyes, and said, "That's already a thing of the past. If it weren't for you mentioning it, I really wouldn't want you to know." "Are you sure you really want to listen?" Li Yun wanted to firmly say, "Yes, please tell me exactly what happened. It's been so long, and I've been confused. I don't know why I went from the Li family to the Chen family's daughter. I want to know the truth." Li Nyangzi sighed before saying, "Your mother is a very good and kind lady. Since you insist on knowing what happened at that time, I will tell you. But remember, after hearing these things, don't think about anything. As long as you know that your mother is the best person, everything she does is for you." Seeing his mother say so, Li Yun became even more curious about what happened at the time and said, "I remember." "Mom, please tell me." Li Nyangzi spoke in a gentle voice. "It was summer 8 years ago, when there was a drought for a whole year, and there was no harvest in the fields. Your older brother was only 2 years old, and I was pregnant with your sister. Our family couldn't survive anymore. Your father and his family went to flee with the villagers. At that time, we walked north from Fuzhou and begged for 3 months, but we couldn't find anyone who could temporarily take us refugees in. All the food we brought with us had already been eaten, and we had been hungry for several days. We couldn't walk anymore and could only stay in a dilapidated temple waiting to die until your mother appeared." Li Nyangzi was lost in memories and thought of the kind and noble lady. When she saw that lady, she almost felt like she had seen a female bodhisattva. If it weren't for the lady's charity, their whole family would have starved to death in that dilapidated temple, right? "Unfortunately, what happened when you met my mother?" Li Yun couldn't help but ask after her as she stopped speaking. Li Nyangzi regained her senses and continued, "At that time, your mother was carrying you back to the capital from your maternal family. She passed by the dilapidated temple where we were temporarily staying, and saw that there were already starving people inside and outside the temple. She gave us all the food she had brought with her, so that we, the refugees, could come to life." Chapter 9. Breaking the father-daughter relationship. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Originally, her cheap mother.in.law was really so kind. However, during the famine, in a place where refugees were piled up, was it really good to give out the food like this? Li Yun asked curiously. "So later on, my mother.in.law gave the food to the refugees and left." Li Nyangzi was slightly stunned for a moment, then couldn't help but turn her head to look at Li Laoda. Li Laoda remained silent for a while and said, "I want to let her own mother have her temper. You'd better tell her, otherwise." After a pause, she continued, "You talk to me, I'll go to the kitchen and take a look." After speaking, he turned around and walked out. Li Nyangzi understood her father Li's meaning. As a big man, he couldn't easily listen to the past of a woman's family. She sighed slightly before saying, "No, if she had left then, maybe there would have been no future. Unfortunately. What a pity." Li Yun wanted to tilt his head and ask. "Unfortunately, your mother is too kind. She left behind some food because she heard that someone else was sick, so she asked the accompanying doctor to treat them, prescribe medicine, and each family gave us some money to buy medicine." Mrs. Li sighed again before continuing, "At that time, your elder brother was also sick, and your mother also gave us 3 taels of silver. Not only did he leave food for the refugees, but he also gave money for medical treatment and medicine." Li Yun didn't know for a moment whether his cheap mother was inexperienced or too foolish and naive. They should have been studying since childhood. Don't they even know the truth that wealth is not revealed? Later on, did my mother leave like this? And how did you meet each other later? Li Yun wanted to chase after him. After a pause, Mrs. Li said, "You shouldn't have known these dangerous things in the world at a young age, but I'm afraid you're just as kind-hearted as your own mother, and I don't know if you'll get into trouble with others. Let me tell you the truth. Those who fled with us for so long and were still alive were not simple people, and not all of them were good people who showed gratitude and wanted to repay their kindness. Li Yun wanted to smile and say, so it's not easy for you and your dad to have taken Big Brother for so long, isn't it? Li Nyangzi looked at her smiling face and couldn't help but touch her head, saying, silly girl, your father is not that simple either. Your father served in the military in his early years and has truly killed people on the battlefield. With his martial arts skills, he can naturally protect his family. At that time, your father placed Wei Nyang and your brother in a dilapidated temple and went to the city to work as laborers, which didn't make us hungry. If it weren't for your brother falling ill later and spending all his silver money, the whole family wouldn't have been hungry for several days. Li Yun wanted to be pleasantly surprised and said, so my dad knows martial arts, so why haven't I ever seen him practice martial arts? Upon hearing her question, Lady Li couldn't help but darken her face before saying, your father was seriously injured later on and has been taking medication to support him, so he hasn't practiced martial arts anymore. Li Yun's heart sank and he quickly asked, my father was seriously injured. So what's going on now? Why haven't you talked to me about how he got hurt? Li Nyangzi looked at her anxious gaze and quickly said, don't worry, he's been nurtured for so many years, and he's already quite well. It's just that our farmers can farm, and it doesn't matter if he's skilled in martial arts. That's why your father's martial arts have been neglected over the years. Although Li Nyangzi said so, Li Yun didn't believe it very much. If she was really seriously injured and their family's early years had spent some of their savings on her, how could her father take good care of her? Thinking of the cough she often heard before, she immediately realized that her father has been suffering so hard in recent years. It's all her fault. Why hasn't she ever cared about her father's health before? If she had discovered it earlier, could she have saved some money for her father to recover well? But she also knew that even if she had truly discovered it in the past, without the experiences in her dreams and her selfish nature in the past, it would have been impossible to save money for her father's medical treatment. A tear fell on Li Nyangzi's hand. Li Nyangzi quickly lifted Li Yun's small face and asked, what's wrong with this? Why are you crying so well? Li Yun wanted to pounce on her arms and cry, it's all my fault, it's all my fault. It used to be me who spent all the money at home, and my dad couldn't take good care of himself. It's all my fault. Why are you treating me so well? It's not worth it. Li Nyangzi quickly comforted her and said, what did that say, silly girl? We all treat you voluntarily. Besides, don't think so. Your father has indeed taken good care of his body. Otherwise, where did the wild game you often ate a few years ago come from? Isn't it all from your father's hunting? If he didn't take good care of his body, how could he be able to hunt? Li Yun thought to himself that when he was 5 or 6 years old, he could often eat wild animals such as rabbits and chickens. Only then did he stop crying and choked up, saying, really? Mom, you didn't lie to me, did you? Li Nyangzi smiled and nodded at her little nose, saying, just you little crying bag, who dares to lie to you? Li Yun wanted to wipe her little face and wipe away all her tears. For some reason, when she was in front of Mrs. Li, she inexplicably became more emotional, crying out whenever she wanted to. Sorry to be coquettish, Mom, I'm not a little crybaby. Li Nyangzi looked at her with a smile, and Li Yun couldn't help but blush. When she was young, she did seem to cry quite a bit, but she didn't follow Li Nyangzi's wishes and was diverted from the topic. She asked again, Mom, is Dad's body really okay now? Li Nyangzi smiled and nodded, don't worry, it's really taken care of. Li Yun didn't continue to ask, but at this moment, she naturally didn't know. If her father's health was really well taken care of, how could he just hunt wild rabbits and chickens? Her father used to be a person who could even hunt wild boars. If it weren't for the famine that year and the lack of harvest in the fields, even the wild game in the mountains would have been almost eaten by hungry people, and the deep mountains would not have dared to enter. After all, Mr. Li had a wife and children, so he wouldn't have risked his life easily. How did Dad get seriously injured? Li Yun wanted to turn and ask. Lin Yangzi looked out the window, as if recalling something, and said, "Your father saw that your mother had revealed her wealth in front of others. He knew that there were some refugees with less than innocent backgrounds, but our family accepted your mother's kindness again. So we secretly contacted your mother's guard and told them to be careful with their hiding. The disclosure of money may only arouse some people's greed." And later on, did the guards believe it? Lin Yangzi nodded and said, "That guard is also an understanding person. With your father's news, they quickly reported to your mother, and then they hurriedly left. Your father went into the town to catch medicine for your brother. With the medicine, your brother's illness improved in a few days. Your father then went to the city to work as a laborer. One night after a month, when your father returned, he actually drove a carriage back to your mother." Li Yun wanted to be surprised and said, What happened?" Lin Yangzi smiled bitterly and said, "At that time, I was just as surprised as you were. However, your father didn't say anything at that time. He just asked me to pack my mother's bags and be soft. He also took your brother to the carriage and escaped from the dilapidated temple. I asked you to kiss me in the car. My mother only found out that after they entered the town, your mother had an abortion and could only temporarily stay at the inn in the town for a month before setting off again to return to Beijing. But halfway through, they encountered bandits. It turned out that one of the refugees your mother helped was involved in those bandits. Originally, your mother had left and he didn't have time to notify the bandits, so he had to let it go. However, later on, your mother stayed in the town for another month, and coincidentally, the person saw her whereabouts and became involved with the bandits. After your mother left the town, she intercepted them halfway. What happened later?" Li Yun wanted to ask, "Is it true that good intentions are not rewarded?" Lin Yangzi continued, "Your mother's guards still have some skills. Although they were unable to fight against the bandits, 2 of them snatched your mother's carriage and escaped, but they were caught up in no time. It happened that your father ran into them halfway back from the town and went up to grab the carriage and ran out. Those bandits wanted to catch up but were stopped by those 2 guards. They didn't have time to catch up, so they ran back to the dilapidated temple to pick up me and your brother. After running for a day and a night, your mother was already pregnant, and this jolt started on the carriage. Your father had to find a dilapidated house in a deserted village to temporarily stop and let your mother have a child. He had originally planned to leave after the child was born. Who knew you were just born, and then I followed suit and gave birth to your sister. So I stayed for another day, and it was on this day that the bandits chased after us to the deserted village. Your father, for our sake, had to drive an empty carriage out and lure away the bandits." Lin Yangzi's eyes flickered with tears, and she choked up as she continued, "But that's it. We didn't escape either. Your mother and I, along with your brother and you too, couldn't escape at all. In the end, your mother also knew that if the bandits couldn't find her, they wouldn't stop. So, citing that I hadn't shown my face in front of the bandits, she asked me to bring some softness and rice to hide you in the cellar. Your mother closed the cellar door and covered it with some straw as a cover. As expected, the bandits returned soon and quickly found your mother in the dilapidated house. I don't know if it was a stroke of luck in misfortune. When the bandits were searching in the dilapidated house, not only did your brother obediently not call out, but you two also obediently fell asleep and didn't cry. They caught your own mother and got most of the gold and silver left outside, so they quickly took her away. Speaking of this, Lady Li was already crying uncontrollably. Li Yun never expected that the nominal outcome of being a biological mother would be so tragic, and couldn't help but shed tears. After crying for a while, Mrs. Li stopped her tears and continued, "After they left, I hid with you in the cellar and didn't dare to go out. It was only when your father came back and called my name outside that I dared to answer. Originally, those bandits chased after your father and found nothing on the carriage. They knew they had been deceived by your father and rushed back, leaving only a few people behind. Although they couldn't kill your father, they still severely injured him. When your father fought his life to kill them and rushed back, those bandits had already left with your own mother. Chapter 10. Overturning a Harrow. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. So, what happened later? Li Yun suddenly felt a bit unsure about what was going on, but still asked. After a pause, Mrs. Li continued, your father was injured too seriously. When I found out that your mother had been taken away by the bandits, she became furious and fainted. With 3 children and no medicine around, I don't know what to do. I can only wrap a cloth around your father's wound and wait for fate to come my way. Fortunately, your father was so lucky that he woke up one day later and wanted to go to the town reporting officer to find someone to save your mother, but he couldn't get out of bed at all. In this way, we made some rice porridge every day by stealing some hidden rice. When your father was better and could barely get up, we went to the town reporting officer alone. When Li Nyangzi said this, a look of resentment appeared on her face. Li Yun couldn't help but ask, did Dad save my mother after reporting to the government? Although she asked this, she knew the answer in her heart. It should be that no one was saved, otherwise how could she grow up in the Li family? Sure enough, Mrs. Li said with anger, at that time, the people in the government didn't believe your father's words. After your father reported to the government, they didn't even bother to go out and investigate perfunctorily. Your father refused to give up. He went to the government 3 or 4 times and was actually beaten up and coaxed out by them. It's unreasonable, how could they do this? It turned out that although Li Yun wanted to know that Ji Shi, the cheap mother, had been arrested for so long and had very little chance of being rescued, he still felt indignant upon hearing the government's inaction at that time. Li Nyangzi smiled bitterly and said, your father had nothing to do at that time, and he couldn't rest assured that I was staying alone in the deserted village with you. He had to return to the deserted village and think of other ways. Later, I thought that your mother had told me about your address in the capital and your father's name, so I thought that if the government didn't send anyone to save your mother here, then your father could always send someone to save your mother. So I decided to take you to the capital to seek help. Unfortunately, the house leaked and it rained continuously at night. Originally, we sold the soft goods left by your mother for silver, managed an escort agency at that time, and followed their escort team to Beijing. But we adults can't stand such turbulence, let alone your 2 newborn children, you and your sister. Within 2 days, both of you fell ill. We can only temporarily stop to see you, but it took several months for your 2 little children to recover from an illness. By the time we arrive in the capital, it will be 6 months later. But at that time, we also understood that if we wanted to save your mother, it might have been too late. Speaking of this, Li Nyangzi sighed and raised her hand to stroke Li Yunxiang's head. I think things can't always be satisfactory. Everything seems to be predetermined by heaven. We didn't easily reach the capital and found your father's address, but we couldn't find him. Later, after multiple inquiries, we found out that just 3 months before we arrived in the capital, your father offended the powerful officials in the court and was demoted from the capital. Li Yun wanted to suddenly realize why her parents had already taken her to Beijing and also had the address of the Chen family. Why was she still raised by the Li family until the age of 6? It turned out that was the reason. At that time, we had almost exhausted all the money we had with us, and we didn't know where your father was being demoted. We only knew it was in the direction of Fuzhou. But by then, our resources had run out, so we had to stay in the capital for a while to find work and settle down. Then you found out that after 2 years, your father had earned enough money, so we took our family back to Fuzhou. After 3 more years of wandering, we finally found your father's family. Li Yun wanted to hear this and couldn't help but feel a little sad, but after listening for so long, she still couldn't hear how she and Chen Yunxiang had exchanged identities. She believed that her parents would never do such a thing, and the only possible thing was that the cheap mother Ji did it. But how did she actually do it? She gave birth to children with her mother one after another, and it was only 2 days before and after. During these 2 days, both her mother and Ji Shi stayed together. How did she do it? After thinking for a moment, she asked, Mother, when I was in the deserted village, my father drove away the bandits in a carriage. Are you and my own mother very afraid to stay in the deserted village? My own mother is a precious daughter, so she must be even more afraid, right? Upon hearing her question, Lady Li thought she wanted to hear more about her own mother's affairs. She couldn't help but think back for a while before saying, although your own mother is a precious daughter, she was much calmer than me, a peasant woman, at that time. It was she who reminded me to look for a place to hide before I could find the cellar. As she spoke, Lady Li seemed to have thought of something and continued, at that time, she even took a piece of cloth and embroidered words on it. When my mother asked her, she even said she wanted to embroider your birth date in 8 characters on it, so that when you return to the Chen family in the future, the family wouldn't know your birth date in 8 characters. Unfortunately, I searched for it later but couldn't find it. Maybe you were taken away by those bandits. Li Yun's eyes lit up. It turned out that Lady Li knew about the fabric, but she couldn't read. Therefore, Ji only mentioned that the fabric had her birth date and birthmark embroidered on it, without mentioning the location of Chen Yinshang's birthmark. At that time, Ji must have been afraid that after she was captured by the bandits, her mother might not care about her daughter's life or death. To be on the safe side, she took advantage of her mother's search for the cellar and sewed the cloth into the wrapping cloth, then exchanged her with Chen Yinshang. She knew that if her mother could escape, even if she didn't care about her daughter, she would definitely take her own daughter away, so that at least her daughter could survive even if she didn't return to the Chen family. But if the mother takes the 2 children away, even if they will be mistaken in the future, as long as the mother still keeps the wrapping cloth, when asked by the Chen family, the mother will definitely talk about the details at that time. If the Chen family were smart, they would probably infer from the clues that the cloth may be hidden in the wrapping cloth, and then Chen Yinshang's identity can be changed back. Looking back now, in the dream, Chen Yinshang must have found the cloth because his mother mentioned it to her later. She was so shrewd that she couldn't guess that Ji must have hidden the cloth in the things left for her at that time, and all things could have been pawned or sold by her mother. Only their wrapping cloth would be needed continuously, even if they were slightly larger, and this wrapping cloth would not be pawned out, and it was not worth reading. Ji did not hesitate to exchange the daughter of her life-saving benefactor in order to keep her daughter alive. However, Li Yun did not blame her. She did not blame a mother who, in times of danger, tried everything possible to keep her daughter alive, let alone sacrificing her own life to save the lives of her family. If it weren't for her falling into the hands of the bandits at that time, the bandits would not have left so easily. They would have searched every corner of the deserted village, and all of them would have been found. The father who came back later would also have been caught. After all, the human heart is unpredictable. Even though the Li family saved her, she was betrayed by the person she saved before and ended up in such a situation. In times of danger, for the safety of her own daughter, she could only do everything in her power. Li Yunxian pretended to be very curious and said, Mom, if you think about it again, since my own mother still embroiders words on that cloth at that time, she should think it's important or leave it for me. Is it possible that she's hiding somewhere you can't think of? After thinking back for a while, Lady Li shook her head and said, No, maybe, I lived in that dilapidated house for about 10 days at that time, and I have searched all over it, but I haven't found it yet. Li Yun thought about it and asked, Then, if you think about it again, what did my own mother leave for you at that time? Are there any things that are still left now? Lin Yangzi shook her head and said, There wasn't much gold and silver left that day. We sold them all to go to the capital, but those things can't hide a single piece of cloth, can they? Li Yun wanted to continue leading her thinking and asked, Is there nothing else besides those, such as clothes? Lin Yangzi chuckled and said, At that time, all we had left were the clothes we were wearing. There were no other clothes left. The wrapping cloth on your and your sister's bodies was still made from your mother's big cotton jacket that was worn outside. Li Yun pretended to be surprised and said, Is the wrapping cloth the clothes my sister and I wore when we were young? Li Nyangzi smiled and said, "What kind of clothes are that?" "It's just a big cotton jacket that was torn apart and cut into 2 pieces for you and your sister to wrap around." It was already deep winter by then, and thanks to those 2 pieces of wrapping cloth stuffed with good cotton, you two didn't get cold. Li Yun wanted to chase after him and ask, "So it's like this, mother? After so many years, has the wrapping cloth already been thrown away?" Li Nyangzi shook her head and said, "We have sold everything your mother left behind. This wrapping cloth is also the only thing she left for you, so she has been keeping it." Li Yun wanted to quickly say, "Really, that's great, Mom. Can you take it out for me to see? Do you think that piece of cloth might be hidden in the package?" Seeing that Li Yun was thinking of something fantastic, Empress Li said with a smile, "How could it be? The wrapped cloth is not precious. It's hidden there. Isn't your mother afraid of losing it?" Although she refuted Li Yun's idea, Lady Li never refused his request. She pointed to the large wooden box at the end of the bed and said, "It's inside that box. If you want to see it, go and take it out." Li Yun wanted to hold back his pounding heart and got up to the end of the bed to open the wooden box lid. He searched inside and indeed found 2 pieces of satin fabric, 2 wrapped fabrics embroidered with peony flowers on a red background. "That's it, there's the wrapping cloth for Chen Yinshang's secret background." The 2 pieces of wrapping cloth were both inner and outer layers, filled with cotton wool. Li Yun wanted to take out the wrapping cloth and return to Lady Li's side, placing them on top of the blanket. Li Nyangzi looked at the parcel cloth with nostalgia and said, "I think this is the only thing left by your own mother that still stays with us. When you go back, let you take it with you. At least it's a thought." Li Yun didn't respond to Li Nyangzi's words. Instead, he couldn't help but carefully touch the edge of the patchwork and said, "Mom, can I open it up and take a look? What if the fabric embroidered by my own mother is inside here? That's what my own mother left for me, right?"